morning sun shines on the gleaming hide of a muscular ranch horse. The aroma of bacon and coffee drifts from the wood cook stove at a cow camp. Silver spurs jingle as the men and women of the West get set for another day in the saddle. From the heart of Canada's finest ranching country, this is the Spirit of the West with rancher and horse trainer Hugh McLennan and his collection of music, poetry, and conversations with the folks who live and work with horses and cattle in the Spirit of the West.
As we slowly ride down into the winter of 2020, reflecting on the past summer, it was pretty good for us, but somewhat different with virtually no traveling. And boy, we used to be on the road a lot. And I did get a lot more cowboying done around the country, which is always a good thing, but looking back over some of our many travel adventures, one of our fondest memories goes back to the summer of 2006. The town of Tumbler Ridge, British Columbia was hosting the famous RCMP Musical Ride, and they invited us up there where Lucky the Wonder Horse and I would take part. We'll remember that great weekend today, and I'll tell you about some of the ways that Lucky helped make it a big success. And that's where I met the chairman of the ride committee. At that time, he was Corporal Kurt Peets, commander of the Tumbler Ridge Detachment, and recorded a terrific conversation about this national institution.
They used to be thoroughbreds. And I asked him, why did you change from the thoroughbred over to the Hanoverian?
That's one of the many questions Kurt will answer about the RCMP Musical Ride and those horses. And now, this will be the last time this guy is going to rope a runaway horse when he's riding in a borrowed saddle.
Bob got a squinty Tom Mix look in his eye, licked the last of his pork chop off his big red mustache, and shook out a loop.
And boy, did things ever go sideways shortly after that. That'll be Baxter Black's colorful story for today. On the Rangeland News, a lot of ground to cover, including this item.
Hog and beef cattle prices well above a year ago. Milk prices running well below.
Our dear friend Waddy Mitchell steps into the Cowboy Poetry Spotlight with a great one about our mutual pal, Don Edwards.
He went on about fat cowboys, how they once were hard and lean before they all used trucks and goosenecks.
On the Urban Saddles and Western Wear Horse Training File, I'll look at the pros and cons of laying a horse down. And a very interesting visit with retired Sergeant Kurt Peets of the RCMP about the musical ride. And this opener from Dave Munsick, I think, is a pretty good fit.
If I could run like the horses run, I'd be ahead of anyone, kicking the red dust at the yellow sun. If I could run like the horses run. If I had a mane on this neck of mine and a big broom tail hanging off behind, I'd hang 'em in the wind, boys, any old time. If I had a mane and a tail behind, yes, I'd be free as the wind, and I'd kick it up to the sun. I'd see a rope coming in and I'd run. Yes, I'd run. If I could move the way the horses do, I'd go anywhere that I wanted to. I might run away, I might come to you, if I could move like the horses do. With eyes on the side where I could see, anyone try to sneak a rope on me, they'd swing it up once and I'd be free. If I could see what the horses see, I'd be free as a wind, and I'd kick it up to the sun. I'd see a rope coming in and I'd run. yes, I'd run. If I could run like the horses run, I'd be ahead of anyone. I'd kick up the red dust at the yellow sun if I could run like the horses run.
We're wondering if we could take part in a weekend built around the RCMP Musical Ride that was coming there, and boy, am I ever glad we accepted that. It was a wonderful time for all of us. We were treated like royalty, and when we had a short break in the action, the chairman of the hard-working committee at that time was Corporal Kurt Peets, and when we finally had a little break in the action, we had a chance to visit.
As a matter of fact, I've been in the RCMP for 20 years, and this is the first time I saw it yesterday, and I saw it for 2 performances.
Yeah, in the rain.
In the rain. As a matter of fact, next year when we have them, we're going to have the RCMP Musical Dolphins.
There you go. And you're not going to do it on purpose.
Boy, oh, that's bad.
But I guess that's something that goes on, basically rain or shine, no matter what.
You know, I was really surprised. I asked them, when would you ever cancel a show? The only time they ever cancel a show is when there's a ton of lightning nearby. As they got 32 lances with the metal tips, it's just for the safety of the riders and horses. That's the only time they ever cancel it.
Where we were on the stand, we couldn't see clearly underneath that tarp, especially in the morning ride. But I did notice after we'd been going for quite a while, there's a horse out there doing the pattern just about right, maybe half a step behind, and there's no rider on him. And could you see what happened?
Well, that's a special trick, apparently just for Tumbler Ridge. What had happened is the horse was off at one end of the arena, the grass was wet and the horse slipped, and the poor rider went for a dump. And the horse, being very much a herd-oriented animal, decided he was going to go run with the rest of the horses. And it was kind of interesting because he did the complete performance. And the interesting thing was, after the performance, I had a girl come to me and she had tears in her eyes and she says, I couldn't believe it. I mean, that was so touching that you had a horse or a riderless horse, and that was for the fallen officers. We just thought that was great. So anyway, that actually wasn't to happen, but we said, yes, that's the story, and we're going to stick to it.
Wow. The missing man formation.
The missing man formation, only for Tumbler Ridge.
Wasn't that dramatic?
Yep.
You know?
You know, you get what you pay for.
That's right. Yeah. I'm sure that things like that happen, and I know that there are a lot of people watching that weren't even aware, probably, because it's such a spectacle, that there was a riderless horse doing the pattern because it blended in so well.
Well, to try and keep your eye on 32 horses and to watch the complete spectacle, that's tough. Yeah. And if you saw, once the horse started kind of going out, they would kind of circle him and bring him on the inside, and they kept him on the inside till eventually got to the very end of the show. They did the dome, and they're able to catch him.
Right. And it strikes me that this possibly isn't the first time that's happened. Something like that.
No, this is the first time in the history of the RCMP.
Did the riders come off during the ride?
Yes, and that's my story. No, it happens quite regularly. Unfortunately, it does.
Kurt talks about some of the other unpredictable things that have happened on the ride, and a song that should have had a lot of airplay a few months ago, when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. Looking back to the summer of 2006 today, and Billy and I, along with Lucky the Wonder Horse, had made the trip to the vibrant community of Tumbler Ridge, where the world-famous RCMP Musical Ride was appearing for 2 performances to celebrate the town's 25th anniversary. Lucky and I did an opening presentation, most of it was without a bridle, on a football field with grass 8 inches deep and in the pouring rain. And it was my pleasure then to be the voice of the musical ride. And after 2 performances, the festivities chairman, Corporal Kurt Peets, told me a lot about this great tradition.
It's really interesting, the amount of different fields that the horses perform on. They go from slop and soup to very hard and rocky and gopher holes to very nice manicured grass. So there's always something in every ride that's just a little bit different than the last ride.
That's for sure. It's never exactly the same conditions. You're never, a carbon copy of the last one, that's for sure. And when you put horses into the mix, especially when there's an entertainment element, there's always that unpredictable element that's going to be a little bit beyond your control sometimes.
Well, the interesting morning performance, we had the horses lined up for the charge at the very end. And those horses are just like a bunch of kids. They finally get to have some fun, and boy, they know what's coming up, and all of a sudden, one horse did a false start, and boom, the horses are all...
Somebody said go, didn't they?
That's what I heard. And before long, their charge was over.
Yeah, you can just see them. Boy, they're antsy. They're anticipating, just like a barrel racer, where's the barrels? Where's the barrels?
Let's go. Come on, guys. Let's go.
But the rest of the time, they're in the double bridle with the Pelham mouthpiece and everything, and so collected and so controlled.
Those are expensive animals. They put a lot of time and effort in, and as a matter of fact, the animals remain, but the officers change every about 3 years.
So I understand.
And so because they rotate, we spend a lot of times training officers more than we train the horses, because the horses kind of get her, but we've got to train the officers.
Yeah.
And it's quite surprising that most officers are non-riders when they apply for the event. They're non-riders, and they have to go through training, and they have to go through selection. But when they come off, they do pretty good. But when they first come on, that's a sight to be seen in the barns in Ottawa.
I'll bet you. Yeah.
If you want a good laugh, January of every year is what they call form up. That's when the horses get together. That's when the riders get together. That's when all the new riders are brought in. And that's when the testing happens. They've got that 10-foot warranty, either 10 feet straight up or 10 feet horizontal. But if you can stay on for 10 feet, you're on.
Is that what you got to do?
Yeah, the 10-foot warranty.
Right. And of course, that's when they'd be introducing some new horses into the ride at the same time.
Every year they try and, put a few more new horses in, and they might even just train them for a year, but not necessarily take them on the ride. But they will put new horses in, and you have no idea which way it's going to go every day.
Oh, man. Yeah.
A lot of fun.
There's much more about the ride, the horses, and the Mounties, but right now, I mostly try to avoid commenting publicly on controversial political issues, unless they deal with agriculture. But I am happy to discuss them face to face, but sometimes it's hard not to. Now, the music of the great Don Edwards is one of the elements that folks have said they really enjoy about this show. Don is undergoing some real medical issues right now, and wouldn't hurt to put him on your prayer list, and we wish him the best. And it's too bad this song didn't get a lot of airplay before the U.S. election campaigns got underway. Here's Marvin Odell and the Red Hot Rhythm Rustlers.
I met him at a rodeo in Prescott. He was leaning on a homemade crutch he'd found. His leg was in a cast from a ride that didn't last. 2 seconds before his body hit the ground. I said, it looks as if you ran into a bad one. He looked at me as if I'd lost my mind. He said, what was your first clue? As he offered me a chew. Said, suit yourself, when I told him I'd decline. He said, to tell the truth, before I'm dead I ought to quit. I'm 42, but I'm looking like I'm 66. But what keeps me climbing on are those good old cowboy songs. If you think I'm a little crazy, that's a compliment. So play some Murphy, play RW, play some Pioneers. That kind of music's made for this old cowboy's ear. I'm a little broken bent, but those songs are heaven sent. And I'd vote for Don Edwards for president. I told him that I'd better be a moseying, and that I hoped someday our trails would cross again. He said, see you later, pard, keep playing that guitar. You never know when some old cowboy might be listening. I watched him hobble over to his pickup truck, moving like molasses on that homemade crutch. He climbed in on his own, but man, you should have heard him groan. Too proud to ask somebody if they'd help him up. He said, to tell the truth, before I'm dead, I ought to quit. I'm 42, but I'm feeling like I'm 96. But what keeps me climbing on are those good old cowboy songs. If you think I'm a little crazy, that's a compliment. So play some Murphy, play RW, play some Pioneers. That kind of music's made for this old cowboy's ears. I'm a little broke and bent, but those songs are heaven sent. And I'd vote for Don Edwards for president. So play some Murphy, play RW, play some Pioneers. That kind of music's made for this old cowboy's ears. I'm a little broke and bent, but those songs are heaven sent. And I'd vote for Don Edwards for president. Yeah, I'm a little broke and bent, but those songs are heaven sent. And I'd vote for Don Edwards for president.
Those kids can play. Well, make sure to stick around for the Cowboy Poetry Spotlight, and you'll hear Waddy Mitchell's poem about Don Edwards. Now back to the horses of the RCMP Musical Ride.
And I had sort of assumed that they'd all be geldings, but it's about a 50-50 mix, geldings and mares, apparently.
All the way through, geldings and mares. It all depends on the personality of the horse. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for a nice match set. You know, somewhere between 15 and 16 and a half hands, somewhere on that area, 17 hands. Yep. Tall animals. They used to be thoroughbreds. And I asked them, why did you change from the thoroughbred over to the Hanoverian? And they said, the biggest reason? Transport. The thoroughbred had such a narrow bone structure that it was hard on them to transport them for 6, 8, 10, 12 hours, where the Hanoverian with a little bigger bone structure, they could transport them all day and they'd arrive relatively unscathed.
Now, would they be like in a tie stall configuration in the trailers?
They are. They're in a tie stall, and of course it's kind of like cattle to the barn. They know where their stall is, and at the end of every show, we have at least 500 to 600 pounds of oats that have to go in the bus or in the trailers to get them to the next show. As long as the horse has his nose in the bag, he's not going to bug anybody else.
Right.
What they found is sometimes when they didn't have enough oats, the horses get bored and they take their nose out of the nose bag and they start nipping, and then the horseplay really begins in the trailer.
Oh, man. Yeah. Oh, you'd wonder. I guess they're expending enough energy on the ride that they would burn up the calories and the energy that they're taking in with the oats. But it seems to me that the more high-energy grain you pour into them, the more hyper they're going to be when they get out of the truck.
Oh, is that it? Oh, we're learning all the time. I was talking to the sergeant major. The parade, or the summer tour schedule, starts sometime around the long weekend of May, and it goes just past the long weekend of September. And so the federal government gives them a budget of about $10,000 a day. And that's what it costs to keep the musical ride on the road from, May till September long weekends. About $10,000 a day.
So how expensive is it for a community like Tumbler Ridge then to bring the musical ride in? When I looked at the infrastructure and 3 horse vans, an equipment trailer, and a bus, the personnel, the farrier, the other people that have to travel with it, I thought, holy smoke, it's going to cost us $10,000, $20,000, who knows, $50,000 to bring the musical ride to a community. So how much is it for a community to bring it in?
Well, I'm not sure if I want to say this out loud, because then every community wants to bring them in. Just this year, the cost is $0. The federal government sponsors the 100% of the ride.
So Billy and I and all our friends and neighbors are helping to pay for the ride.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We're happy to do it. It's a lot better than some of the stuff our tax money goes to.
After the musical ride goes through a particular town, they get a financial statement at the very end saying how much money did you raise and then where did it go. All of the money has to go back into the community, every penny.
Wow.
Well, a little bit later, you'll hear how Lucky helped raise a lot of the money to make that weekend a success. And next, how roping a runaway horse when you're riding in a borrowed saddle led to a spectacular wreck. Baxter Black has that story when the Spirit of the West continues right after this.
Howdy, friends. This is Baxter Black on Spirit of the West with Hugh McLennan, and I'll be right back after this with a little peek at the Prescott Cowboy.
Your land is a legacy, a challenge from those who tended it before you to build on their foundations. At Corteva Agriscience, we understand what it means to be the stewards of a legacy. We embrace the challenge of building on the foundation of Dow AgroSciences to maintain your trust, to bring new solutions, to help you care for your land. See how we can help build your legacy at rangeandpasture.com.
And for our Canadian listeners, just check Corteva.ca, the Canadian website.
Bob, can you help me? There's a wild horse over here bothering my mare, said his neighbor lady over the phone. Bob, a top cowhand, was staying on a little ranch down at Prescott. Be right there, he said. Well, he hadn't got his gear moved yet. His good saddle was still in Utah, so he'd borrowed a real cheapo. He saddled up, grabbed his rope, and rode to the neighbor's, and sure enough, he could see a smallish dun mare with a tangled mane and one big foot prancing outside her corral. "Oh, thank you, Bob," effused the grateful neighbor. "I've got a blueberry pie in the oven. Hurry back." Bob got a squinty Tom Mix look in his eye, licked the last of his pork chop off his big red mustache, and shook out a loop. He rode straight to the intruder. She, the horse, wheeled and broke into a run with Bob right on her tail. With the wind whistling through the gap in his teeth and his ears laid back, Bob snugged his horn knot down over the saddle horn and bent to the chase. Down to the junipers, rocks, and scraggly pine he followed in pursuit. At the edge of a steep arroyo, he threw his loop. It was just long enough and just big enough to completely encircle the head and two front feet. Bob put on the brakes and the line came tight. A shot rang out. Well, not really a shot. It was the sound of his 5-and-dime saddle horn breaking off and boomeranging over the escaping mare. While he was momentarily out of control, a dead juniper reached out and snagged his right stirrup, broke it off, and jerked his horse sideways. The altered trajectory took him over the bank, flattening his hat and creasing his forehead. His assisted dismount laid him out in the sand. His horse was astraddle a log and afraid to move, and the saddle hung sideways. Bob rescued him and tied him to a stout limb, and then went back to look for his pocket knife and hat. And in that short interval, his borrowed horse pulled back, broke the reins, and ran all the way home. An hour later, still a mile from the barn and the blueberry pie, Bob appeared out of a brushy thicket, looking ragged and skinned up, carrying only the two broken reins over his shoulder. A quail hunter sat up under a nearby tree not 10 feet away. He looked at Bob and said, "Lose something?" "Huh?" This is Baxter Black on Spirit of the West with Hugh McLennan, brought to you by Corteva AgroScience.
Not much can raise your stress level more than a tractor breakdown when you need it most. We've all spent hours on the phone and driving around trying to find the right parts, and that's no fun when you're missing something you need to finish the job. Here's a better way. Just go to bctractorparts.com. That's where you can find about any part for any make of tractor. If you're restoring a vintage tractor or just keeping up the maintenance on the ones you're using, you can have the parts you need in a short time. And you know what? There's some great pictures of tractor restoration projects and much more right there at bctractorparts.com. What? Oh, you don't have internet? Well, try calling Mark at 250-395-0960. Just ahead of the Rangeland News, here's a couple of legendary singers and songwriters, great individually, but when Valdy and Gary Feldyard do a show together, it's spectacular.
I rode a horse called Reason, I was ground into the dust. I rode a horse called Passion, Wanderlust. I rode a horse called Spirit, and it got me to this place. Where will I ride to today? Goodness knows. Where will I ride to today? I rode out of El Paso, both sides of the Rio Grande. I rode north from Montana, through a cold and a snowy land. I rode 100 horses, hocked 1,000 bales of hay. Where will I ride to today? Goodness knows. Where Where will I ride to today? I rode a budding stallion, he took me on a tear, through the woods and back again, he's searching for his mare. I rode him till he found her, and he's there with her still. Now I need another steed to get me o'er the hills. So I rode a horse called Habit through barbed wire fences. I rode a horse called Savior, and I regained my senses. I rode a horse called Goodness, and we're still on our way. Where will I ride to today? Goodness knows. Where will I ride to today? Horse ride can be risky, a leg can still get broke. It's rough to ride through brambles and it's tough to light a smoke. But nothing else can get you where a horse can easily go, like up a winter coulee when it's waist deep in snow. Goodness knows where she's going, I just hang on to the horn. I throw my stirrups, my boots and my saddle, and my backside still get worn. Wherever goodness takes me, I know I'll be okay. Where will I ride to today? Goodness knows. Where will I ride to today? Goodness knows. Where will I ride to today?
The Rangeland News from the Spirit of the West, a roundup of issues and events from the world of agriculture.
The top of page one says prices producers receive for what they sell went up this fall, and with the latest on that, here's Gary Crawford.
Prices farmers got rose in September for almost every commodity, sending the USDA September prices received index up 0.9% from August, putting it up just a little over 1% higher than September a year ago. Some of those gains in prices, though, negated by a September rise of 0.4% in prices that farmers had to pay to do business. That index 0.6% higher than a year ago. On prices received, a quick look at a few commodities. September corn prices rising 29 cents in September, taking them to an average $3.41 a bushel. However, that was still 39 cents below September a year ago. The all wheat price pushed up 18 cents from August at $4.73. That's 47 cents more than a year ago. Soybeans, the biggest gains in September, up 58 cents to an average $9.24, 89 cents more than September a year ago. Quick look at livestock. Hog and beef cattle prices well above a year ago. Milk prices running well below. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
And of course, because of the pandemic, the musical ride was canceled this year, but the RCMP are hopeful they can bring the show back to the public next year. Chuck Gronveld, one of the best-known men in the Canadian cattle industry, passed away on October 30th at the age of 83. Chuck was a tireless promoter and ambassador of the beef industry. He spent more than 20 years with Alberta beef producers, meeting people, talking about the industry, sharing stories, and shaking hands. And he was a fixture at the Calgary Stampede, where he spent years as barn boss, helping ranchers and 4-H members with their show cattle. And he was awarded the 2015 Legacy Award for individual sustained contribution for those efforts. He considered the ranch on the Highwood River in southern Alberta's Gladys Ridge district as his true home, and he lived there until 2 years ago when he moved to Okotoks, Alberta. Next regular cattle sale at the BC Livestock Co-op Kamloops Yards is November 24th. Then on November the 25th, it's the Williams Lake Bred Cow and Heifer Sale and the regular sale in Williams Lake on the 26th. Get all the information and see the sales streaming live at bclivestock.bc.ca. Meanwhile, at the Innisfail Auction Market, pre-sort calf sales on Mondays, regular cattle sales, of course, every Wednesday, as it has been for so long. And starting very quickly, November the 27th, there will be bred cow and heifer sales on Fridays. Give the Danes boys a call and see all the information at InnisvaleAuctionMarket.com. Now down to the final item. Billy and I were going through the basement, sorting out a bunch of stuff that we probably should get rid of, and I came across one of my old logbooks from my truck driving days. Now, these were company trucks, and I was a company driver, and we had a full shop staffed with good mechanics. And after every shift, we'd fill out a trouble sheet with anything that might be going wrong with the truck. The next day, we'd read what comments the mechanic said about our complaints. And here's a few of them from my book. I wrote down, left inside tire almost needs replacing. And the reply, almost replaced left inside tire. And my complaint, there's a mouse somewhere in the cab. And the reply, cat installed. And my complaint, something loose under the cab. And the reply, tighten something under the cab. Another one, engine seems to be missing. And the reply, engine found after a brief search. And this is the one I like the best. I described it the best way I could. Noise coming from under the instrument panel. Sounds like a midget pounding on something with a hammer. And the reply, took hammer away from midget. And that's the Rangeland News. Coming up on the Urban Saddles and Western Wear Horse Training File, I'll look at the pros and cons of laying a horse down. Does it help the horse or does it make him worse? That's next when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. You know, there's a commonly held belief among a lot of horse people that if a horse is really wild, aggressive, fearful, troubled, that laying that horse down can be a miracle cure in changing his attitude. Well, I don't think it's quite that simple. And that's the subject for the Urban Saddles and Western Wear Horse Training File coming right up. Riding horses on the beaches of the Caribbean and on the coast of Prince Edward Island. Paragliding above the ocean. Touring farms, ranches, plantations from Hawaii to Australia. Sharing our love of the Western way of life with live Western music on the deck under the stars. And so many more precious memories. So many of those great times that Billy and I have been looking back on. And as you know, we've decided to take a step back from hosting cruises after all these years. And wouldn't you know it, the world changed before we were able to do our farewell voyage. Now it's still scheduled for June of 2021, and we're still making plans and preparations to have the whole group start things off here on June 17th with a visit to our place and a concert with the Western Spirit Band. The plan is still to have coaches take you all from our place up to beautiful Sun Peaks for a wonderful experience, and then we all head down to Vancouver, a night in the spectacular Fairmont Waterfront Hotel, something really special planned for the next morning. Then we board the Holland America Conningsdam for a 7-day cruise up the Inside Passage. There'll be lots of extra events for our group, including, of course, that famous White Pass Rail Tour. Sounds wonderful to us, but of course, we really can't control the future as much as we try. Jim and Karen and Megan are happy to discuss any questions you might have about joining us. You can call them at 1-800-530-0131 and stay tuned for more updates.
Now it's time for the Horse Training File, brought to you by Irvine Tack and Western Wear, Canada's largest Western store.
At Urban Tack and Western Wear, they'd love to deliver everything to their customers on horseback, because after all, riding is their passion. Of course, that's not really possible, but I'll tell you what, you can order anything online and they'll deliver to your door in no time. By truck, that is. So wrangle up your Western Wear and more at urbans.ca, and get this, shopping is free on orders over $100. Some restrictions apply, or stop in today the good old-fashioned way. Exit 305 off Highway 2 by Crossfield.
Canada's largest Western store.
I had a listener call the other day, and He said he was working with a somewhat troubled horse, and he'd heard that laying a horse down can work miracles in changing a horse's outlook, so he tried doing that, but the horse got really scared, defensive, and he was never able to get the horse on the ground. He wanted to know if laying a horse down is useful and how to go about it. Well, I've heard the same thing, and I have used it a few times, but I'm not convinced that it's a miracle cure for a troubled horse. Now, this guy also wanted to know how I go about it, and here's what I've done. And I know it won't work without a lot of preparation. The horse, first of all, must yield softly to every kind of pressure from the halter, and then I'll teach him to lead by each front foot, obviously with a long cotton lead rope at least 12 feet long. And the next step is to have a halter with a 12-foot lead and a soft 22-foot line that I'll loop around his right front leg and bring it up over his back on the right side just behind the withers. And then I'll stand on his left and bring the shank over the right side of his neck. And that way, you see, I can tip his head to the right. And then I'll work on having him lift his left leg in response to gentle pressure from that cotton line on his left foot. And that's all I'll ask for the first session. And once he's comfortable with lifting that foot, I'll hold his foot up until he looks for a little bit of relief. And here's where the timing and the touch is really important. I'll try and help him understand that the relief comes when he touches his left knee to the ground in a bow. And that's enough for that session. Now, building on it, I'll work with my own body position in a downward direction when his knee is on the ground. And with a little more gentle pressure, watch for him to lower himself gradually. And here again, if you time that gentle pressure properly, he will sink right down. Now, when he does, you make sure you are out of the way. He probably won't lay flat on his side the first time, but he might. Now, whether he does or not, reward him with gentle rubs and encouraging words, and don't keep him down for too long. Now, I have seen some horses make a huge change after being laid down, and I've seen lots of others where it didn't help at all. It's something I don't recommend you try unless you're pretty experienced with a lot of different kind of horses. And for Urban Saddles and Western Wear, Canada's largest Western store, that's the Horse Training File. Lucky, our buckskin mare, the Wonder Horse, is just out the window right now, and she's got a heavy winter coat, but she's looking great. And she's got to be over 35 years old now. Looks like I could still just saddle and ride her. We attribute a lot of that to her daily feeding of Hoffman's Horse Ration, and you can find out all about it at hoffmanshorseproducts.com. The way the Canada Revenue Agency deals with ranchers and farmers has changed a lot in the last few years, and the financial decisions we make today can have a long-lasting impact on our bottom line far into the future. It really helps to have a trusted professional who really understands your situation to guide you with all your accounting requirements and your tax preparation. Having an accountant who knows the difference between a Hereford and a heifer, what a slick and backgrounding are, and that Alfalfa and Timothy are not just names from a storybook really helps. Kathy McMillan of PMT Chartered Professional Accountants understands the intricacies of specialized programs like Agri-Stability and Agri-Invest. She understands the demands on your time and can help you spend more time doing your job and less time dealing with endless piles of paperwork. See pmtaccountants.com or call toll-free 877-383-8081. There's more about how the tiny community of Tumbler Ridge, BC overcame a lot of obstacles, wildfire evacuations, inclement weather, and much more to pull off a really memorable project after The Pride of Innisfail, my pal Ivan Daines, and a good song he wrote, and titled it The Horse Trainer.
Set his saddle, rope and blanket, halter and snaffle too. In the middle of the round pen, getting ready to go and do. Start a young horse or pony, it's easy to say. Speaks with a calming voice on this horse's first day. Talks the horse's language as he moves her around. She's frightened, but with encouragement, soon she settles down. He grew up raising horses on the land where he lived, read and watched the legends, learned to ask and give. His filly became unafraid on this first hour's time. The next day sort of partnered due to pressure release defined. The third day she was traveling to a place she'd never known. Now she's on the payroll the way the great Ray Hunt had shown. Talks the horse's language as she moves him around. He's frightened with encouragement, but soon he settles down. He grew up raising horses on the land where he lived, read and watched the legends, learned to ask and give. Great horsemen and great women will tell you in their own way. Your horse has to trust you, what you do and say. From the great Greek horseman Xenophon, 400s BC. John Rary in the USA, 1800s to the greats today. Talks the horse's language as he moves her around. She's frightened, but with encouragement, soon she settles down. He grew up raising horses on the land where he lived, and read and watched the legends, learned to ask and give. Talks the horse's language as she moves her around. She's frightened, but with encouragement, soon she settles down. He grew up training horses on the land where he lived, and read and watched the legends, and learned to ask and give. Read and watched the legends, learned to ask and give.
You know, I think it was I know it was the late Ronald Reagan that said it. It's amazing what can be accomplished if nobody cares who gets the credit. And Tumbler Ridge was a fine example of that. Here again is the event chairman, Kurt Peets.
We had such a good response from all the ranchers around, from all the people around. Pounding, hammering rain for the first performance. Probably, I don't know, 1,500 people? 2,000?
I'd say 2,000 by the looks of it.
Yeah.
Sitting there, absolutely drenched in a downpour.
And then for the evening performance, we must have had another 1,500 people. Yeah. And cold and miserable and rainy. And you know what? Everybody thought it was great. Not a single complaint.
Well, it is such, there's no way you can really describe it, you know, to someone that hasn't seen it, because it's so stirring. And the music is so, I was talking to Todd as we're, you know, going through the whole routine for the music and the pacing and the music that paces every maneuver they do. There's some stirring, heart-stopping stuff there. There's Boots and Saddles. There's theme from the Magnificent Seven. There's the theme from Gunsmoke. There's, you know, there's Wagon Wheels. There's, oh, it's beautiful.
You know what? That's something for everybody. It's just a wonderful performance, and the men and women of the musical ride really make themselves available to the community.
Oh, yeah.
You know, for reception, the barns are open. You can take as many pictures as you want, and I guarantee that they will smile from the first picture to the 1,000th picture.
Yeah, it's not like this bus full of rock stars with their agents and their security people that are, you know, no autographs, no pictures, no, he's very temperamental, he needs this. No. I mean,
and I sure hope they don't trash their rooms. But no, it's great. You know, tomorrow morning, 6 a.m., they're on the bus and they're heading down the highway off to Hinton for the next show. So, yeah, I mean, for these men and women to be away from their families for that period of time, is a real commitment, and and I'm very thankful for that, because we as a community really benefit from all the hard work that they've done.
And I know that there had to be trials and tribulations, and what a great working example of what a community can do with the right leadership and the right spirit and the right enthusiasm. You didn't have a grandstand. Got that grandstand together. You had no hotel, or you had a hotel that had no staff. You looked after everything. I mean, what you guys did to pull this together, and no matter what happened, then the weather threw this incredible curve at you, and you had smiles on your faces no matter what was happening.
Yeah, and to compound that, about 2 weeks before, have a mass evacuation of Tumbler Ridge, and throw that into the mix just at that critical time of getting your final details together. Yeah, it worked, because people will always rise to the occasion. That's what I found.
Now, when we were making plans to attend that weekend, the folks in Tumbler Ridge asked if we'd consider having Lucky the Wonder Horse adopted. What? Yeah, they wanted to do an Adopt Lucky project, where the adopter paid a minimum of $150 to adopt her for the weekend. In return, they'd receive 1 ticket to the musical ride, an invitation to the Friday night reception with preferred seating, and a photo op with Lucky. Well, Lucky said sure, she was good with it, and the Grizzly Valley Saddle Club paid $1,000 to adopt Lucky for the weekend, and she loved the attention, and we still have that stall sign. Next week, Kurt will be back, and we'll get right into the challenges of being a longtime member of the RCMP and what it means to him. Coming up is this week's classic Song of the West and the Cowboy Poetry Spotlight, when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. I played the song Don Edwards for President earlier, and I thought we'd bring him back with this week's classic Song of the West. This one was written a long time ago, and when Don recorded it, he dedicated this version to his great horse Rebel, who's buried on the Seven Shoe Ranch in Texas.
Along about a roundup time in Texas, way out west, I lost a pal and a friend, boys, and I laid him down to rest. I wept and moaned o'er his grave. To me, boys, it was sad. I know down beneath that mound is the best pal I ever had. Now my best pal was my good cow horse. Now he's gone to rest. I laid him down beneath that mound in Texas, away out west, where the cactus blooms o'er his grave and the coyotes cry. I know he sleeps in perfect peace beneath the Texas sky. Dear old pal, it breaks my heart to leave you here alone. I'll go back and ride the range on that Texas roan. But my love for you, old pal, it will linger on. I will always think of you, although you're dead and gone. Dear old pal, it breaks my heart to leave you here alone. I'll go back and ride the range on that Texas roan. But my love for you, old pal, it will linger on. I will always think of you, although you're dead and gone. Yodelay-o-delay-delay.
Now, in the Cowboy Poetry Spotlight, Waddy Mitchell was inspired to write this while he and Don Edwards were on tour and staying in New York City.
I saw emotions well up in him as she pointed with a grin, saying, sign there at the bottom, please?" while handing him a pen. I could tell he needed venting, or I feared he might explode, so I dug in for the onslaught while he proceeded to unload his opinions on that young gal, how this country should be run, and how lawyers should be something scarce, and how business should be done. How you didn't need no contract when a man's word was an oath which was worth a whole lot more than any paper signed by both. And how at one time giant deals were closed by simply shaking hands 'cause you could stake your life and livelihood on the honor of a man. And how neighbor didn't merely mean some people living near, and how all could walk the streets at night without a nagging fear 'cause citizens could arm themselves. And crimes weren't blamed on guns, but on the crimesters that committed them, and bad ones still got hung. And how a shyster's reign was short-lived 'cause a town would run 'em off. And how your thugs and thieves would land in jail 'cause judges weren't so soft. And how divorce was near unheard of. And how kids were raised at home, and how there weren't these old folk centers 'cause we took care of our own. And how your cars and tools weren't throwaway 'cause things were built to last. And how a man would tip his hat out on the street when ladies passed. That young gal's eyes were glazing, and she just stood there in a stare. I was getting kind of antsy, and I was wanting out of there, but he went on about fat cowboys, how they once were hard and lean before they all used trucks and goosenecks, and how strikes were seldom seen, and how if you were able-bodied, then you found yourself some work because them welfare checks weren't handed out to anyone that shirked, and how you didn't need no resume to land yourself a job, and how public office wasn't just a legal way to rob, and how a visit to your doctor didn't cost an arm and leg, and how an appointment with your banker wouldn't dictate that you beg, and how insurance was affordable 'cause folks weren't out to sue because they weren't expecting 10 times more than they were rightly due, and how a liberal press weren't handing us this constant bill of fare, and how your taxes wouldn't break you 'cause we all paid our fair share. But then the public trough weren't feeding near so many bureaucrats, and yes, the government was small once. Now it's like a swarm of gnats, and how it just keeps on a-growing, and how the working man can't win, and how our deficit won't shrink till they spend less than they bring in. And where democracy is struggling, we must send a helping hand, and how it ain't right that some foreigners are buying up this land. He'd gone on for 20 minutes before he took hisself a breath. I thought, I better stop him, for he talks that gal to death. So I said, "Don, you're right on all counts, but, pard, we really gotta go. And if you don't sign that there contract, we can't rent the video."
Well, thanks again for joining up and riding along, and I sure hope you can be here next week at the same time. And as always, thanks to our great support crew, Mark and Kathy McMillan. Be sure to check out our YouTube version of the show, and you can get the show as a podcast as well. Just go to our website for the links, hugh-mclennan.com. Till next week, I'm Hugh McLennan. Hope to see you down the trail somewhere real soon.